In medieval warfare, there are two types of invaders. The first steals whatever wealth they can carry. The second plants a banner, claiming the land. For much of the 11th century, the Indian subcontinent dealt mostly with the first kind. Rulers like Mahmud of Ghazni led swift, brutal raids down from present-day Afghanistan, plundering wealthy temples before retreating across the mountains. By the late 12th century, a new figure emerged with a distinctly different geopolitical ambition: Muhammad Ghori. Ghori prioritized the building of a lasting empire over the simple extraction of wealth. We can see this intent in towering physical evidence, like the massive minaret of Jam he left behind in his home province of Ghor. Grasping this transition, the evolution from raider to ruler, explains exactly how the subcontinent's political landscape was altered. This map illustrates the geographical vulnerability of the region. To reach the fertile plains of North India, invading armies from Central Asia historically funneled through a few tight mountain corridors, like the Khyber Pass. Blocking that route in the 12th century was a powerful regional dynasty known as the Chauhans. They ruled a massive territory from their capital in Ajmer, led by a formidable king named Prithviraj Chauhan. Prithviraj is the subject of a famous later epic poem, the Prithviraj Raso. According to the legend, after being blinded and imprisoned by Muhammad Ghori, the captured king used his mythological archery skill to shoot an arrow by sound alone, striking Ghori down. But as historians, how do we separate a poetic narrative from actual historical reality? While the poem celebrates an almost superhuman hero, the historical records show us an incredibly ambitious political leader. Prithviraj was fighting to ensure the survival of his civilization against a permanent, expanding military threat. The defining clash happened at the First Battle of Tarain in 1191 CE. Prithviraj successfully surprised Ghori's forces, inflicting heavy losses and securing a decisive tactical victory that forced the invaders to retreat. A mere raider would have taken his remaining loot and cut his losses. A conqueror regroups. Ghori spent the next year systematically rebuilding his army to prepare a massive retaliation. In 1192 CE, the two sides met again for the Second Battle of Tarain. This time, Ghori returned with a much larger, better disciplined force, ultimately overwhelming Prithviraj's army and winning the day. The immediate geopolitical consequence is visible right here on the map. Without Prithviraj's central army to hold the line, Ghorid forces rapidly overtook Chauhan territory. The defeat at Tarain broke the region's main defensive floodgates. It allowed a foreign military administration to pour into North India and set up a permanent base of operations. As the Ghurids consolidated the northwest, Ghuri's general, Bakhtiar Khilji, turned his cavalry east toward Bengal, quickly overpowering the local Sena dynasty. Here we see the severe cultural cost of conquest. In his path stood Nalanda Mahavihara. This massive, thriving global university had served as a center of human knowledge for centuries. Khilji's forces brutally attacked the complex. The university's legendary library, holding hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, reportedly burned for months. The loss of recorded history was irreversible. We know about this attack largely through the writings of a Persian chronicler named Minhaj al-Siraj. His account contains a massive historical error. He recorded the capture of a fortress populated entirely by shaven-headed Brahmins. The thick walls of the university had confused the invading soldiers into thinking it was a military stronghold. Those shaven-headed men they slaughtered were actually unarmed Buddhist monks. A tiny beacon of hope emerged from the tragedy when a handful of scholars managed to escape across the mountains into Tibet, carrying whatever surviving texts they could physically hold. The transition from temporary raiding to permanent rule required the active erasure of the region's accumulated culture. Centuries of learning went up in smoke. Fast forward to 1206 CE, both Muhammad Ghori and Bakhtiar Khilji were suddenly killed, leaving their newly acquired territories without their primary architects. If they had been mere raiders, their deaths would have dissolved their efforts instantly. Because they built an administrative state, power passed directly to their generals. They took over governance, established taxation, and laid the foundation for the Delhi Sultanate. This administrative transition allowed the generals to introduce a centralized power structure that would eventually manage land and revenue through a new class of military governors. The events of the 12th century leave us with a clear historical reality. The shape of history is dictated not by the armies who visit to destroy, but by the ones who decide to stay.